And now it is my pleasure to introduce Laurel and Albert. Laurel is a curriculum and instructional specialist in special education at the Collaborative for Educational Services in Massachusetts. Laurel has worked in public schools and post-secondary colleges and universities, teaching English and special education courses for the last 33 years. Albert is a leadership and instruction continuous improvement consultant at the Collaborative for Educational Services in Massachusetts, and he has worked in schools for 30 years as a teacher, professional development facilitator, and instructional leader. And now, without further ado, I will hand it off to our presenters to get us started. So take it away.
Thanks, Olivia. And welcome, everyone. It's so great to see people from all over the country kind of entering their information in the chat. Don't you think so, Albert?
I do think so. That's wonderful.
So Albert and I have had the pleasure of working together for several years now. And when the COVID pandemic disrupted our work for a little while with the way things changed in public schools, we embarked on a journey together to think about this process of kind of partnering on behalf of and alongside children with disabilities in public schools through the IEP and 504 team process. And the focus of this, and I think the inspiration for a lot of our work, came from people who have gone before us in education. You know, it was really wonderful to see at the start of this webinar, the upcoming webinars, and some of the amazing people, you know, Doug Fisher and Nancy Fry, and just folks who have done a lot of the groundwork on which our work is built. And I also think about Zaretta Hammond and her work around culturally responsive practice, and so many others. So our thinking in coming to this book and responsive teaming is really about how do teams of people who partner, including educators and school leaders and parents and students whose learning profiles are so unique and amazing, and community partners, come together to do the work that is described in federal regulations. So responsive teaming is really about an approach that involves all team members as equal partners in cycles of decision making. And so we came up with this graphic that you see on your screen to kind of encapsulate what it is that we're doing when we sit together as mixed teams of people with students who have learning profiles that have led to the need for a specific plan and specific entitlements to support access and effective progress in school. So the cycles that teams engage in, no matter whether they are involved in the initial evaluation and eligibility determination, or reviews that could be annual or could be on just a regular cycle for students who have 504 plans, or they're in the process of thinking about how to strengthen the fit between the student and perhaps the school discipline code in a manifestation determination. The cycle, no matter what the specific focus of the team is the same. And the cycle for planning really involves specific questions that are derived often from state and federal regulations and guidance documents, or perhaps derived from precedent legal decisions, or from the needs that team members might bring. So we come together with these questions that we have to answer. And then when we do our best work, I believe, because we are people with different perspectives and experiences, and resources and understandings, and knowledge and expertise. It behooves us to answer our questions by looking together at data. And I know this can be hard, right? It requires time. It requires knowledge and fluency and even the availability of data. It requires that all team members understand the data that we're looking at. And then ultimately, at the end of our time together as a team, whether we're on a 504 team or an IEP team, we make decisions, and we should all have input into those decisions. So we're not just making our decisions based on a single data point or a single agenda, but on the whole picture of an amazing, incredible, unique learner, and what we know works for learners and what we know is required when we determine eligibility, develop IEPs, and determine placement in accordance with state and federal regulations. So often the questions that a team's answering come from different guidance documents. And for example, if we're talking about eligibility determination, the team needs to know what the questions are well before we sit together at the table. We need to have a sense that all team members know what the role of the team is, what the questions are that the team has to grapple with, and where those questions come from. So in an eligibility determination, those questions come from federal regulations at 34 CFR 300.306 C2. And, I rattle those numbers off and they sound how they sound, right? But in the end, those regulations are publicly available and easy for us as the people who chair teams to make available to our team members and to make understandable for our team members. And that's really what we're doing when we're responsive to one another. The same thing goes with the data that we collect and share. Whether we're sharing stories, observations, evaluations, reports, whether the data we're looking at are qualitative data or quantitative data, that data should be looked at by all team members and used to support our claims. And the claims are what we make when we answer questions. So for example, if an eligibility determination question, usually the first one is, does this child have a disability, right? The answer to that question is yes or no. It's a claim. It's not a fact. And so one person on the team might feel strongly that the answer to that question is yes, and might even have a particular disability type or profile in mind. But unless that team member can go back to the data and say, I am saying yes because of this story and this pattern that we see when we observe this child as a learner, and this information that came from this norm referenced assessment, and this information that we see when the child is not only in a classroom learning setting, but in a less structured setting that's part of what we do and offer in our public schools. There's no way for teams where disagreement about the claims exists to get to agreement. So the way to get to agreement is to look at data and align our claims with data. And once that's done, only after that work is done together, right? The messiness of looking at data and talking about data and sharing our claims and being clear about how our claims are connected to that data, can we begin to answer questions like, does this child have a disability? Does the disability impact the child's access or progress in the general curriculum and what we do together academically, functionally, and developmentally in our schools? Albert, could you move us forward, please?
Sure.
So the cycle that we looked at is described in more detail in chapter 1 and 2 of the book. I certainly have just done a lot of talking, but this is the cycle upon which the rest of the book is based. And throughout the text, what you'll see are step-by-step strategies and specific tools that will guide you through an exploration, if you dare, right? An experiment, maybe, in a more responsive way to do the team process, particularly for teams that include not just educators, but also family members, students, community members, evaluators, and school leaders. So at every stage, from pre-referral all the way through eligibility, planning, and placement, the book offers some points to remember, some actions that you can take, so things that you can actually try out and experiment with, and some tools to use to support those actions and to support the entire team in understanding what it is that you are facilitating and leading them through. Each chapter also follows a case study through the responsive teaming process, because stories help us understand what to do, how to do it, and when. And there's also some illustrations of things that might occur when you try something new. And sometimes those things that occur will be what you anticipate, and sometimes they won't be, but the case studies give you a chance to think and talk together with other people about that. And then finally, the book addresses responsive teaming for reevaluations, for independent educational evaluations, and for manifestation determinations. Albert, I'm going to hand it to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Laurel, that wonderful introduction. And thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. You have choices, and we appreciate that you're here with us. So the referral stage is the place where somebody, an educator, parent or caregiver, has noticed that the fit for this young person between their learning profile and schooling is not working. So when we're not sure about what's happening, what the barriers to success might be, as Laurel said, it could be, right, a disability. That would be a claim, but it may not be. There might be something happening in the schooling environment that can be adjusted to improve the fit between the learner and the schooling experience. So a responsive approach to IEP and 504 teams, when that young person comes to the team that receives the referral, what the folks who have made the referral have collected information. They may be bringing data. As Laurel said, they may be making a claim. And so all of these people have done some work. They've collected information. And what we want to do is honor all of that. So a responsive approach to 504 and IEP teams takes advantage of all of this work that has been done. And in this time of investigation, in this time of collecting data, in this time of really noticing and studying and pondering what might be the cause of the difficulty in the fit between the child's learning profile and the schooling experience. So what's really important here in this responsive process is that there's no starting over, right? If the folks receiving the referral decide that there might be a disability, that there is good reason to advance, to take the information that's been collected and to forward it to an IEP or 504 then what we notice is we're not starting over all of that information. We were going to make really good use of those insights and the data that have been collected. So the first strategy we want to offer you tonight is creating the student learning profile. I say tonight because we're on the East Coast and it's past 6:30. So in this learning profile, what you are able to collect is shared access for multiple people to view the student information in one document. So this is a collaborative and collective effort. And while traditionally we may privilege the voices of certain members of a team with certain expertise, we may privilege the voices, for example, of certain specialists. When we create the student learning profile, we are inviting, welcoming, and so actively soliciting the voices of all of the people who know this young person. And all of these individuals are contributing or are invited to contribute information to the student learning profile. The other benefit of this profile is that we are sharing a timeline for updating the profile throughout the referral process. And we are organizing information so that all of it is accessible and user-friendly if, in fact, there is a referral in the future. You're going to find this tool on page 101 of our book. Again, in creating the student learning profile, we are not assuming that there is a disability or that the student will be advanced to a referral. We are, as Laurel described so beautifully, we are in the data collection process, and we are looking to collect data that will support a claim and answer a question, as Laurel said, about whether or not this young person has a disability. So these are the next three slides are illustrating an example of this tool, and you will see this on page 202. And all of these tools are accessible in our book through QR codes, and you can have all of these tools digitally. So you're going to notice in the beginning of this tool, important experiences, backgrounds, cultural or home information. And you'll see an example here. And you'll see throughout this book that the case studies and examples refer to Laurel or Albert so that we can really give good examples of what these might look like. You'll see an opportunity to record primary areas of strength, and you see those, and supporting evidence, and then areas of need and also supporting evidence. So again, when we are making a claim, so areas of strength and areas of need are claims, and supporting evidence are the data that we are using to corroborate those, to make the case for those claims. And then attempted supports. So what supports have been attempted and how has the student responded to those supports, right? And we know that so often when a student is referred to a student support team, there is often the need for additional data. And the student learning profile provides an opportunity and a space to collect that data. So that, as we said earlier, there's no starting over if the team that collects the information decides to advance the student to an IEP or 504 team. And then additional comments or questions for the team recognizes the fact that all that we know about a student, right, may not show up in numbers and may not show up in particular observations of student work or observations of behavior. So there may be additional information. And again, this is a place where responsive collaboration honors every voice of all of the adults who care for this young person. And Laurel is now going to make a few comments about developing the plan.
So if you begin the process in this way of organizing information according to a learner profile, rather than organizing information by the source of the data. So for example, I don't know how many of you have been at meetings. I'm thinking particularly of in the early stages of the eligibility and plan development process, where a succession of people read their reports. I don't know if you've been to those kind of meetings. I certainly have. And I think that one of the challenges, or one of the ways that this text challenges that practice, is it asks the question, is that a responsive way to deal with the data that we collect during an evaluation process? Is it responsive to all members of the team to have people sit there while team members read their reports aloud, or while team members share numbers and letters that we know are meaningful and relevant to some members of the team, right? Dibble scores, DRI, right? Benchmark assessments, right? This grade level of reading, that grade level of math. That information is meaningful and relevant to some members of the team, but not to all. And so what we propose is that in that pre-referral stage and evaluation and eligibility stage in our book, is that the process that occurs when the team finally sits together is not a reading of reports or a orally sharing letters and numbers that not everyone on the team understands or knows how they relate to the fit between the child and schooling, but instead we create the learning profile together. We say, what are our claims about the student's strengths? What are our claims about the student's areas of need? What are our claims about whether those strengths and areas of need comprise a profile that fits with our understanding of disability, of a disability? And then what is the information that we've gathered about the things we have done, the interventions that we have tried, that suggest that this and this and this work for a child, or this and this and this do not work for a child, and how do we know? And this kind of an approach to getting ready for developing the plan allows teams to involve kids, because students are often the best articulators of what works and what doesn't work at school. They often can tell us a lot about their strengths. And if they can't, oh my goodness, we want them at these meetings, because they need to know that there is no child that does not have superpowers and strengths. And so this way of dealing with the process and the getting ready to develop a plan allows us to even encourage children as young as age 3 to be there, sharing about their strengths, sharing about what their areas of need are, what do they want to improve, where do they want to grow, hearing from adults. We think you're amazing and we know you can learn. And here's what we would like to see you grow in. What do you think of that? So I feel like that's our call, I guess, in this responsive collaboration process. And so when we move into developing the plan, we selected a couple of excerpts, so a strategy and a tool from our book to support you to do that. And so Albert, if you could move us forward. So our second strategy that we recommend when the team is developing the plan is the use of visible note-taking. Now, I know you all take notes during meetings, believe me. And oftentimes, depending on who's at the meeting, well, I was a parent of a child who had an IEP and a child who had a 504 plan. And at the same time, I was also a team leader, and so everyone was taking notes. Oftentimes the notes didn't say the same thing, by the way, right? If I'm there as a parent and I'm taking notes, my notes might say something a little different than perhaps the team chair's note said, right? My advocate or my attorney or my family support provider or my counselor might take different notes too, right? Depending on what's happening in the meeting and what is being heard and perceived and interpreted by different members of the team. So we suggest taking visible notes that the entire team can see. And there are a number of ways to do that. You can do it whether you're remote or whether you're in person. I'm a big fan of like 5 different colors of markers held in one hand and, using newsprint or a whiteboard if that's available. And if not, we'll show you some options that you can use both virtually or in person in just a minute. The important thing is that there's a shared structure for organizing all of the information, and you're including in the visible notes information that every single person on the team has shared. So unlike this webinar, if we were in a team meeting, we want to share the air and we want to make sure that people are conversing and dialoguing, and it sounds more like a popcorn, event than like a lecture. And then the information is also organized so that it could immediately be entered into, or the team chairperson could immediately say, "You'll see this in this part of the plan. You will see this when we provide the written plan to you here. This is how it will go." This also is an efficiency, an act of efficiency, because for those of you who do this work, the notes sometimes don't easily move into the forms. And so then you're, going through your notes and highlighting and flagging and scrolling, and it's taking a lot of time. Whereas if you do this visible note taking process in a way that clearly aligns with the forms, it's just a cut and paste. So Albert, if you'll take us forward.
Sure.
So this is an example that comes from page 301 in our text. And there's actually a folder at this page that offers several different types of visible note taking. And there's also a description of the visible note-taking strategy on page 265 and 266, in case it's something you've never done before. So this particular example is something that a team might do when they are meeting. This was done with a Jamboard, actually, a Google tool that is available at no cost for anyone who's using like a Gmail or a Google Drive for any of those resources. And so you could do it with a PowerPoint slide, you could do it with a Google slide, but the idea is you would invite a member of the team. In this case, you can tell the picture is from a home, and that team member, in this case, this is my son. This is a picture of my son, Elijah, and he's in our house. And it's reminding, because the team asked me to share a picture, it invited me to choose something that I felt represented Elijah as a person with strengths and abilities, and shows him in this photo as someone who is smiling and happy and engaged and making eye contact. And so that was a great way to connect with me during a time when Elijah's behavior and self-regulation were not very good. And so that's a piece of this strategy and a piece of what makes it responsive. Another thing that you can do is you can offer the opportunity for team members to observe, in this case, Elijah's strengths by creating these Post-its that you can create in a Jamboard. And so at the same time, while people are present, either virtually or physically in a room, they are pointing out the things that they are noticing in the data right? The data could be stories about Elijah, or it could be norm referenced assessments that show that something good is happening or something that they consider a strength is occurring. And this process can be done simultaneously, or it can be done round robin. But if you capture these things visibly, people don't feel the need to repeat themselves. They can see it's up there. They can even put it up there themselves if you give them that ability. And it allows everyone to see what different people on the team are noticing about the child and the data and the fit. So this is one way to think about, right, a responsive practice that you or anyone on the team could offer. It also saves a ton of time because you don't read reports when you do it this way. There's no reading reports. You literally just do a go around. Another tool that we offer is a team meeting notes tool that looks a little more conventional. The nice thing about the picture version, right, is that you could use it for families whose fluency with English is different, is maybe they are multilingual families. They are families that bring multiple cultures to the table, and so they could post it in whatever language they are most comfortable with. You could also prompt the team to use language that is more conversational and less academic. In this tool, if you chose this tool that you're seeing on your screen, you might be working with a team that is more fluent with academic language, right? A team that prefers a more narrative heavy look at gathering information. And this particular team notes tool allows us to organize the questions, data, and decisions so that the team can always be focused on what it is that we're talking about and what it is that we need to decide, and then capture what it is that we decided. So in this example, you can see the conversation was about a free, appropriate public education for a student who is eligible under Section 504. And there's this place under the question to insert the regulations so that you can remind people that we're working within certain parameters when we talk about free, appropriate public education, right? And we're working toward a particular outcome, which is access that is as adequate as the needs of non-handicapped people, which is, the language I don't particularly like, but it is the language in the current regulations. And then it also allows you a place to document the school's practices or policies, so information from the student handbook. In this case, you can see that the dilemma is attendance. This is a child who's striving to be in school and not yet succeeding, and that's where the fit is a challenge. And so you also see the student's voice actively in the data. So if this child did not attend this meeting, someone spent time gathering information from the child to make sure that the child's voice is present and the team is considering it as part of the data that is used to inform the decision about how to respond to attendance. There's also a place, if there are difference of perspective, at the bottom of this note template for capturing that, right? Because again, capturing this visibly for all team members to see allows someone who perhaps didn't agree with perspectives of other members of the team to know that they've been heard and to have that on hand, and that can really support de-escalation. So this strategy and this note-taking approach, this visible note-taking approach, comes from our experience with facilitation and person-centered planning. I know that these are practices that some schools and districts have adopted and other schools have stayed away from, perhaps. But I just want to encourage you to understand that doing this really systematically and regularly creates a level of comfort and shared rituals and routines that allow team members to trust one another, particularly if trust has been broken, or if there's not a shared sense of trust. So that's when you might use this. Albert, I'm coming over to you.
Thank you. So far in this webinar, we have invited you to consider the referral and then also developing the plan. So now the plan is developed, and we know that implementation is the place where too often the excellent data, the excellent thinking, the truly diligent efforts of all members of the team to identify the supports, the interventions that will improve the fit between the student and the schooling experience, where that might falter. So as we consider implementation, we want to invite you to consider the importance of collecting data to monitor implementation. And this strategy of collecting data is described on page 201 of our book. Ensuring access to the plan for all team members. So we want to be sure that everyone who is involved in the team and involved in implementing the plan has access to the plan itself, to monitor implementation, to engage in implementation with fidelity. Our tool also provides a shared structure for organizing data and information that shows that the plan is being implemented with fidelity. And also our strategy and our tool to collect data can also be used to protect confidentiality, because different individuals who are responsible for implementing the plan may need access to only certain parts of the plan. So as we look at the third tool that we're offering you today, implementing the IEP or 504 plan with fidelity, what I want you to notice is that the purpose of such a tool is to understand if the plan or the degree to which the plan is being implemented with fidelity, and therefore to collect data to show that the elements of the plan, the interventions of the plan, are actually effective in narrowing in strengthening the fit between the student and the schooling experience. So from left to right in this table, you're going to notice the first column, types of support. And the purpose of types of support is to notice what provisions have been made in the plan to support the student, and the degree to which they are being implemented, and then also the degree to which they are being found to be effective. So you'll notice accommodations, modifications, services, specialized instruction. And I'll just make a quick note here that in our work with IEP plans, we frequently notice scant attention paid to specialized instruction. And the truth is that the regulation shows us that a student for whom an IEP plan, that an IEP is developed, requires specialized instruction. If the team does not find the need for specialized instruction, then in fact the student is actually not eligible for an IEP. Frequency is also to notice that the degree to which a support will be effective depends on the fidelity of implementation, which includes the frequency, and also in the column to the right, the duration, and then the longevity. So really paying careful attention to what type of support is being recommended, is being required actually in the plan, and the frequency, duration, and longevity of implementation are key to noticing, to collecting data about whether or not this accommodation or this support has been found to be effective. And when we think about setting, we are paying attention to general education settings, to academic courses, to non-academic activities, to special education settings, in-class support, resource room, substantially separate settings, to provision of services by a community provider, perhaps an out-of-school placement, for example, as in a work or mentorship. So there's a full range of settings that we invite the team to consider in terms of providing the least restrictive environment, and also a full range of settings that may be available to support this student to better make adequate progress in the general education setting. And finally, data indicating implementation. So I want you to notice spot check observations. So we're looking for the samples. We're sampling the settings in which the services have been identified. We're also sampling the work of the various providers who are delivering these services, so that we are getting a good representation of the settings and the work of providers to see that implementation is proceeding with fidelity. Then you also see selected interviews represent the range of settings and the range of roles that are responsible for delivering this plan: a specialized service provider, teachers, parents and caregivers, right? Remembering that in a responsive process, everyone at the table likely has a role in developing the plan, implementing the plan, and ensuring the success of the plan through fidelity of implementation. And finally, in the right-hand column, you see relevant student work samples. And so we're looking for evidence of the types of supports that have been identified in the plan. Are they being manifested in the student work samples? And if so, to what degree? And if not, that's good data to notice that we need to support implementation. And I want to be clear that if you are sensing or feeling any trepidation in moving towards monitoring implementation, because of course there could be those challenging conversations, those most necessary conversations and questions to be asked in terms of implementation, notice that in a responsive approach, we approach the entire process without judgment, without criticism, right? We are gathering information, we are gathering data. And if we find a place where implementation has faltered, then we come with curiosity, with genuine care, to ask a question, to notice, well, how come, right? What support is needed? What information was not conveyed? What understanding about the plan, about implementation of supports has not been adequately conveyed? So it is from genuine curiosity, appreciation for everyone's efforts, and curiosity about what may be needed to make sure that implementation is aligned with the provisions of the plan. Everything, I'll just say one more thing. Implementation, everything written, everything encoded in an IEP or 504 plan is to meet the needs of the students. And the stakes are high for the success of this student. So monitoring implementation is about matching our efforts with the importance to the student of receiving all of the supports that are encoded in an IEP or 504 plan. And that concludes our presentation. And I'm going to turn this back to Olivia.
And now we did have a couple of Q&A questions, so we'll go ahead and get right into those. So Anita asked, would it be recommended that the learning profile be completed while RTI services are being administered, specifically in Tier 3?
I honestly think in any tier, right? So the idea is that we're organizing information in a way that is clear and consistent. So you could, right, start this learning profile process as soon as you have a suspicion that the fit between a child and learning isn't good. So it could happen well before you ever suspect disability, right? It could also happen as a way to, if the team were used to it, you know, and a child were preparing to exit services, to exit a 504 plan or exit an IEP, it would be a really interesting tool to use to monitor the child's fit as they come off of a plan. So it's just about, like, imagine if what we did for kids with disabilities was the same thing that we did for all kids. You know, I'm waiting for that day. And so this, I guess, the learning profile is a step in that direction. Albert, what do you have to share?
I would certainly echo all of what you offered. And again, the learning profile is useful not only through the IEP or 504 process and the provision of RTI services. But as Laurel said, I think I would want to emphasize that when a student is being reevaluated, either the annual evaluation or the 3-year reevaluation, to have that growing body of data, right? Considering, if you remember the days of the CUME folder, remember that? And we, as Laurel said, we accumulate information for students who are not identified on an IEP or 504 plan. If we did the same thing for a student learning with one of these plans, imagine the wealth of information that would be available not only at the annual reevaluation or the 3-year reevaluation, and then the reclassification of a student. All of that effort and all of that information is now available not only to teachers, but also to the student, right? To advocate for themselves as learners. If the student is living with a disability, imagine the power and the arsenal of data that would be available to that student moving forward to live a life of preference.
Yeah, it's such I love this question, by the way, because I also think there are implications for the process of evaluating students. If we had our RTI data, right, our Tier 2, our Tier 3 data organized in the same way that we organized what we do for 504 teams or IEP teams, and the conversation was a similar conversation, we wouldn't lose the data. It might also allow us to do fewer norm referenced assessments, which, you know, that's valuable data if everyone on the team knows what to do with it.
Right.
All right. Thank you so much. And then Monique asked, do we need consent from parents to develop these profiles?
Now, this is a process, right? So as long as you have consent to evaluate, the profile itself happens after you've collected the data. So you do need consent to evaluate. You need consent for an initial 504 eval. You need consent every time you evaluate under IDEA for special education. But the how of it, the how the team comes together and organizes and uses and talks about data, that's what the profile is, and you don't need consent.
And when we are including parents or caregivers in the development of the learning profile, their participation is extremely important, yes, obviously, in this process. And it's been our experience that parents and caregivers, because the learning profile is an asset-based tool, it's been our experience that parents and caregivers are really overjoyed right, to participate in this process, and they can visually see to take stock of the strengths and assets, and to see that those strengths and assets are being recognized and celebrated all around the table.
Yeah, it's really amazing. I mean, what person on a team can't say, what is one of this kid's superpowers? Right? It basically, it creates a level playing field, because everybody on the team can talk about, including the student themselves, this is my superpower. This is what I'm great at. This is what, and to start with that, to say like, that is what we're leading with, you know, and then to be able to talk about, and here are some concerns, some gaps, some places for growth. You know, it's just really, it's something everyone on the team can understand. It brings a level, it levels the playing field.
Great. Thank you so much. Next question is from Deborah. She said, I love it when I can get kids to come to their own IEP process, and I like this style. However, it seems like if the student is present, they'll hear the good and the bad and tend to focus on the bad. So do you see this in your experience?
Yes, absolutely. And honestly, I think it's a human. I don't think it's just students that do that. I think adults do it too. I believe it has to do with the physiology of anxiety, and the fact that we are wired when we're nervous, when we're fearful, when we're angry, our brains flood with cortisol, our amygdala shuts down, our frontal lobe stops, or our amygdala is activated and our frontal lobe stops working. That's what's happening for everyone. And so our threats are like big, loud things resonating in our head. Negatives are big, loud things resonating in our head. And the positives tend to get lost, which is why we always want to focus, like, again, if you're looking for a strength to area of need ratio, 6 to 10 strengths to one area of need would be great, right? One area of need that we're actually going to see change, that we're going to actually identify data that we have today that in a year when we're successful is going to look totally different. And we're going to say, this is how it will look different. When you know how to read, this is what this number will say. This is what you will be able to do. And this is how it will sound when you read aloud, right? It's making things more tangible and meaningful and relevant. That is what we want to do in this process.
Yeah. So in addition to the showing the student that the purpose of our work together is to meet the learning challenge and to really equip the student, right? With an additional superpower. I love that term. With an additional superpower can help put the learning challenge in its proper perspective. And also, I think, reminding the student that every one of us, right, every single adult at that table, everyone at the table has strengths and also has learning challenges in the world, right? So that this is a common experience of being human, right? And that might help allow the student to place their challenge in the proper perspective.
I also think if we can teach kids to self-direct their IEPs so that they are the one saying, here's the attendance sheet, please sign your name. Here's what we're going to talk about, my strengths. Here's what we're going to talk about, the things that I need to get better at, the things that I want to get better at. Here, I cannot wait for the day when kids write their IEP goals. Right? This is what I want to learn. This is what I want to be better at. This is what I need to be doing differently so that I am great at school. When kids do that, and when we involve kids in that way as leaders of the process, the adults tend to rally around the kid. So I've seen that.
Yes, I think that's amazing. And I think the chat agrees wholeheartedly, seeing a lot of yes. But all right, I think that's all the questions that we have for now. If you do have a question that didn't get answered today, feel free to send your questions to us at info@corwin.com, and we'll send those along and get those answered for you. And thank you again to our amazing presenters, Laurel and Albert. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you to everyone who's joined us and participated. And congratulations again to our winners. And have a great week.
If people email me, by the way, I will get back to you. So it's one of my favorite things to do.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. If you reach out and let us know, we will get back to you. And we appreciate your feedback. And thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you, Olivia.
Yeah, such a pleasure.
Yes, thank you all so much. All right, have a great week. Bye.
Bye-bye.